Numerous reports indicate that manufacturing has emerged as the favorite target of ransomware groups and hackers. In response, a new report from Industrial Media discusses the evolution of industrial cybersecurity, its current state, and the tactics hackers are using, including phishing schemes, malware, and ransomware attacks. It also details solutions in arming manufacturers with the knowledge and resources needed to win more fights on this highly complex and ultra-competitive battlefield. Download the industrial sector's new battlefield by going to manufacturing.net/cyber. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. When it comes to industrial cybersecurity, the challenges are numerous. But fortunately, so are the solutions. And over the last nearly 100 episodes, we've discussed a wide range of strategies and provided insight on an arsenal of tools and best practices for protecting the manufacturing enterprise. But perhaps the most polarizing of these techniques is zero trust. While some unwaveringly champion the cause of this approach, others question the ways in which it is typically deployed. Perhaps this dichotomy is best represented in the Palo Alto and ABI Research The State of OT Security report. It found that 93% of those surveyed were familiar with zero trust, and 87% found the approach to be the right fit for protecting OT environments. However, half of those participating in the research also stated that there are practical blockers that prohibit implementation, with these obstacles including configuration issues for legacy devices and default methods used by contractors and OE partners in accessing the industrial control systems. Adjusting to or overcoming these challenges can be costly, and perhaps most daunting in a production environment, time-consuming. In the end, like most things in the cybersecurity world, the answer lies in striking a balance between restricting access and implementing safeguards against time-consuming processes that haven't been implemented correctly or explained properly. Here to offer some insight on this and other industrial cybersecurity challenges is Roman Arutyunov. He's the Senior Vice President and founder of Xage Security, a leading provider of zero trust access and protection solutions. Roman, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. You know, we have all this conversation in the industrial realm talking about digital transformation and Industry 4.0. It's creating a lot of, let's call it, interesting cybersecurity challenges as well. We've talked a lot about some of those things in the past. What are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing right now with this expanded threat landscape that manufacturing's throwing out there?
Yeah, good question. So thanks for having me, by the way, Jeff. I really was looking forward to this talk. So it's interesting times for sure in operational technologies. Cybersecurity, protecting the critical infrastructure is becoming a more and more challenging task. Some of the dynamics that are going on in the market is the ransomware is playing a huge role, right? 71% of attacks, according to the latest data, involve some sort of ransomware, right? Manufacturing specifically is a huge portion of, cyber attacks. 25% of all cyber attacks are happening in manufacturing. So that is a huge slice, right? And what's going on is, you've seen a number of attacks over the last year, like all the way things from like Lockbit that affected a number of manufacturing companies, Volt Typhoon, which was kind of hard to discover because it's sort of like living off the land. It was there. It wasn't really doing anything, but it was there. Clorox came out and said, they got taken down by, I think it was Scattered Spider, right? That caused them over 350 million in losses, right? But if you look at the common pattern across all of these attacks, and what's happening is the attackers are really going after the low-hanging fruit, right? It's things like exposed VPN accounts, right? Stolen credentials. They get in through these VPNs. They compromise a system. They enumerate the network, escalate privileges, and then they spread laterally, right? And this is a very common pattern across all of these attacks. And And it's just going to continue in that sense unless we really do something about um, the core cybersecurity measures to protect ourselves, right, in manufacturing sector specifically.
Well, you threw out a lot of great stuff that we can dive into there. The first place, let's start, because you talked about some of the core elements of cybersecurity. Credentialing seems to be one of those things. It seems like a really simple dynamic in terms of using better passwords, using stuff like double factor, other different strategies there, but we continue to struggle with it. When you look at even going back to like Colonial Pipeline, that was a credential issue that people, they used some logins there that they'd found on the dark web. We hear a lot more about people leaving default passwords in place. What are some of the things you're seeing there, either that are continuing to be issues from a credentialing perspective, or maybe some of the solutions that you've come across as well?
Yeah, so I think credential is going to continue to be a challenge. The reason for it is much of the assets in the manufacturing space and critical infrastructure in general, many of them don't even have credentials, right? Or have very poor credentials, right? Something that may just, a single account to do everything, and as a result, the account gets shared and the credential gets shared, right? But many of them don't even have credentials at all. So, um, and then there's this vast set of variety of type of assets, all the way from the very modern type of control systems to very legacy equipment with variety of security controls built in. The other challenge is these environments tend to be highly distributed under the control of various plants and plant operators with varying degrees of cyber discipline, right? Um, so what there's a couple of things that could be done about this, right? Here at Xage, we came up with an identity-based approach to enable access and this at the same time protect assets, right? And like I like to say is, whenever you're going to enable access, you got to think about protection. And a best solution that you're going to bring in is going to be one that delivers both, access with zero trust that's identity based and also protects the assets at the same time. Um, and um, we've done quite a bit of work to make sure that our approach is, highly applicable to the environments that our customers have in manufacturing, which is a variety of different assets. It works even with assets that don't have credentials. It's highly distributed, gives you controls for multiple administrators across various sites. So it satisfies the operational needs as well as the cyber needs.
Yeah. So let's dive into both of those. Let's start with the access portion of it. As you mentioned, manufacturing's got a real diverse collection of ways that we try to, for lack of a better word, log in or get access to a lot of this different equipment, data, what have you. What are you seeing as some of the bigger challenges and hopefully the accompanying solutions there when we're talking about things like remote monitoring, which became so much of a bigger issue during COVID and during the pandemic? And then we've also got a lot of this legacy technology that you referenced before. A lot of people don't call it operational technology with manufacturing. It's just old tech. So this creates a lot of issues when we try to also bring in new stuff. How are you seeing folks respond to a lot of those challenging dynamics, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, they over the last, I would say, and I witnessed this myself. I drove a lot of this myself. So in previous lives, I was actually running an industrial networking products group at ABB, where we went through and we created networking solutions for control systems, right? And over the years, hundreds of millions of control systems we networked and became data driven, right? So that is the value you get from it. It's data driven, autonomous, really machine based autonomy that allows you to extract huge benefits in reliability, cost effectiveness, better products, less downtime, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, but it leads to cyber issues, and the tools, unfortunately, that manufacturing companies or critical infrastructure companies really have relied upon the same tools that they've used for decades. Things like VPNs, things like firewalls, right? And maybe a password vault or something like that. Um, you know, all of these tools really have become so complicated to use, hundreds of thousands to millions of firewall rules, uh, password vaults that have, proliferated, became disjoint, and became attack surfaces themselves. And VPNs, they've been in the news for a while now, right? You've seen all those VPN news, especially like in the last year or so. We've seen, one VPN after another not only become the attack vector, but it itself became you know, the the host for the attack itself, right? That the software in the VPN became compromised, and attacks were launched from the VPN software itself. So, um, and that's part of it. That's the big part of it is the tools that organizations use are the same old tools that are decades old, that are vulnerable, and they have to disjoint. They're disjoined, and the organizations struggle to piece them together.
So, Roman, is that a technology issue or is that a people issue? Because a lot of the solutions that we come up with that maybe are not the ideal solution, it's because we're tailoring that to the individuals that we put in charge of the equipment, the network, or what have you. Do we need to train people and inform people better, or do we need to be smarter from a technology perspective? Which way is the better one to go, do you think?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Jeff. I mean, the at the end of the day, it's not really a technology issue anymore, right? There are much better solutions on the market. Xage Fabric is certainly one way to go to eliminate that complexity and enable access and protect your assets. But organizations are also, they're slow to move, right? And slow to change. Um, and I think at the end of the day, this cybersecurity solution should not just, protect or be just focus just on cyber. I think it also needs to be a productivity tool, right? And and I think that accelerates the transition. If you give an organization a tool that or a product that improves productivity and at the same time protects their assets and infrastructure, they're much more likely to adopt it and move forward. At the end of the day, many of these companies are motivated by, production, right? And they increase production, eliminate downtime, and if you give them something that, also protects their assets along, as well as doing that, um, it really accelerates things forward.
No, great. I love that. Yeah, it's definitely these are productivity tools. That's a great way to look at it and a great way to phrase it. Not only for getting support kind of further up the food chain from in terms of investing in these types of tools and strategies, but also getting buy-in on the plant floor as well. I think whenever you can show production-focused individuals that this is not something going to slow them down, but help them to be better going forward, I think the buy-in is going to increase significantly. That's a great point.
Right, right. I mean, I can give you a good example of that where, it's a simple example. We have customers that are, they operate, so in this case, turbines that are in the middle of the ocean, and there's wind turbines, and they actually have to fly helicopters to service them, right? And they, they, you know, many occasions, on a few occasions, they've flown a helicopter out there and they've realized that the technician before them has changed the passwords and they didn't tell them, right? And it's not tracked anywhere. It's sort of just, and they're on their laptop in some sort of an Excel spreadsheet, and and it's not shared. So, they would have to fly back, and they would have to chase this person down and figure out what the credential is. In the meantime, the production is down. They just wasted all this, flight time, the technicians' times and resources flying the helicopter, and uh, it could be much simpler than that, right? With Xage, they can use their identity to authenticate. Everyone's got their own credential, everyone's got their MFA, everyone's got their roles and policies of what they can do, right? So not all of these challenges eliminated.
Very interesting. I want to get more into Xage in a little bit here, but got to follow up again. You talked about manufacturing continuing to be such a huge target for the hackers. They're going after them, and we've talked a lot about a lot of those reasons. But you come back to these passwords, and in your example, I mean that's a very grand scale with having to go to the point of operations on a helicopter in the middle of the ocean. But downtime on a regular plant floor, if you're making cookies in Madison, Wisconsin, if that line is shut down for 15 minutes to find a password, that's a huge deal and a huge concern. What, in your experience, do you think is there just a culture in manufacturing when it comes to security? It just hasn't become the priority that it should be yet. Is it just because we are so production focused that it just falls to the back of the line, so to speak? Or is there some other maybe overriding issue or mindset that just prevents us from embracing it like we should?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on there, and it's certainly you would think that the downtime and the associated costs would be motivators enough, right? But having spent time in manufacturing over the last 15 plus years, mentality in a lot of places is still that this won't happen to me, right? They are they're they're really focused on production as they should be, and there's tons of challenges that exist in production. They just cyber becomes a secondary priority, and there's a mentality that this won't happen to me. Now we do see movement, right? We do some change. We see, other industries, other sectors in critical infrastructure went through the same thing, right? We do see changes in this. We do see more budgets. We see groups and responsibilities being assigned to the CISO and CIOs to address cyber challenges. So that's changing. That's good news. The other thing is really compared to other industries, I feel like a bit that manufacturing lacks some regulation, right, at this point still. And and some of the other industries are more heavily regulated, especially in energy, for cybersecurity perspective. And I mean, I think it's just a matter of time till more regulation comes into manufacturing, especially critical manufacturing. And really, we're seeing already that companies are trying to get ahead of that. They're seeing it coming, they're trying to get ahead of that.
No, I would agree. I'm glad you brought up kind of the points about the progress that has been made. I think over the last 2 years, we've seen more growth in cybersecurity and investment in cybersecurity than maybe the decade preceding it. So there is a lot of very encouraging things taking place right now.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. It's good times. I mean, that's why it's kind of excited about this talk from the beginning. It's good times for operational cybersecurity, especially in manufacturing. There's a lot going on.
Absolutely. Well, one of those topics that comes up, and I've actually, maybe a little bit surprisingly, found it kind of polarizing with some folks, and that's something that Xage talks about a lot, and that's zero trust and putting those types of processes in place. So just to play devil's advocate with you here, Roman, I'm going to take the approach that I don't like zero trust because it slows my people down. It takes too much time to really get to where I need to go, as opposed to just getting in there. This machine knows who I am. Why do I have to deal with all these zero trust procedures? You tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I think it gets back to this whole point of cyber solution needs to be both a productivity and a cyber solution, right? So I think there's some things that zero trust enables that are actually much easier, right, to deal with. For example, that one of the core principles of zero trust is an identity, right? And by establishing an identity of the person, you actually can enable things like single sign-on. And single sign-on is a huge productivity improvement, not just a security improvement, but also a huge productivity improvement. You're no longer tasked with trying to figure out how to sign in on a machine and, you know, a control system, uh, a historian, et cetera, et cetera. You can use your identity with single sign-on and it's much better user experience, not just more secure, but much, much better user experience, right? So there's productivity from that. How about, some of the zero trust solutions also, unlike with things like VPNs, where you have to deal with installing agents and bringing up a bunch of tools on your machine to, you know, programming tools for your PLCs, VPN agents themselves, RDP clients, VNC clients, to do a bunch, just to do some work on your equipment. With zero trust, you can eliminate all these tools, right? You can let agents, you can eliminate all these tools, and you can just access everything from a browser, right? So a simple overlay, do everything from a browser. That like always keeps you separate from the network, keeps you away, but allows you to, interface with the assets that uh, you need to do work with. Plus huge cybersecurity benefits, right? Now moving on to cyber benefits, much smaller attack surface. Um, you only get access to the assets you need to just in time, just for the right amount of time, and just with just enough access. So really shrinking that attack surface and preventing, attacks.
Roman, one of the things you brought up a couple times too is ransomware. We're very familiar with that in the industrial sector and all of the issues that ransomware attacks present. I'd like to get your take a little bit on it because we're hearing differing reports. Overall, we think the number of ransomware hits has gone down, but we're not sure if that's the number of attacks or just the number of reported attacks. It does seem that these ransomware attacks have escalated in terms of double or triple extortion campaigns. The amount that's being requested every time there is a ransomware attack has gone up. So we're seeing, it seems like the attackers getting much, much more aggressive and demanding. Is that because we've been successful in shutting down more attacks? Or is this just the next natural evolution that the bad guys are taking here?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the data is misleading a little bit here. I mean, I actually think the number of attacks is up, and perhaps it's not being reported in the right way, and perhaps organizations, the impact of some of these attacks is small, so organizations don't really have to report it, right? But the number of attacks, according to, the data that I have is actually, up quite a bit compared to last year. The Organizations are also better prepared today, because I've seen that this shift happening where in the past, where organizations simply focused on detecting threats, right? So that means that they're able to identify that post-attack that something is happening, right? But they have not prevented that attack in the first place. And after detecting it, they are also no better off in preventing the next one, right? So today, over the next, over I would say the last couple of years, there's been a more focus on protection and prevention. That means organizations are, adopting tools like access management solutions, segmentation solutions, privileged access management solutions, identity solutions, to really focus on protecting themselves from attacks. And I think that's playing a role, where it's not the ransomware attacks are happening, but we're better prepared to protect ourselves from them and mitigate post breach, right? So the impact in a lot of these attacks, the impact may not be as big as it has been in the past. Now, some of the bigger ones, we also see, some ransomware that's, has been able to extract quite a bit of money and, has caused significant amount of downtime. Usually you have some sort of a nation state um, presence in those types of backing in those types of attacks, right?
So let's look at the response to a lot of these ransomware attacks, and we're going to paint with some real broad strokes here. But if you had to give, I don't know, a letter grade, a number out of 5 stars, whatever you want to say, just looking at the response in terms of we know some folks have paid, we know some have not, we know some folks have had data ended up being released sort of out into the wild. How would you say the industrial sector has, or how does it stand in terms of its response to a lot of these ransomware attacks? Is it a C plus? Is it 2 out of 5 stars? What would you tell us?
Huh. It's actually in the next area of sort of focus now for organizations. The response is still quiet. Sort of, I would say it's not well coordinated yet.
Okay.
It,
Yeah.
it still has some ways to go in terms of being better coordinated. I think organizations need to, uh, you know, focus more, focus some more on shrinking that attack surface, on protecting themselves from ransomware in the first place. Um, and then, after they, and as at the same time, implement controls to be able to mitigate and isolate the impact. So, they can, take the, they can disconnect that account that's been compromised very quickly across the whole footprint, or disconnect that machine or isolate that machine that's been compromised very quickly, right? Have those types of controls so they're able to better respond. And then the next area would be also to spend some time on is really being able to recover, right? Now that you've you shrunk that attack surface, you have controls to isolate compromised accounts and assets. Now you got to recover, right? And recovery solutions are also, coming up to market.
Excellent. So we've got this ongoing dynamic here where we've got more attackers out there, more things to worry about. Visibility continues to be a concern. At the same time, we've got an influx of tools that have come out to the marketplace, and it puts those in the manufacturing space at a little bit of a tough place because there's a lot of options. They may have limited budget. Maybe they've already invested in a bunch of tools, but they also want the newest, shiniest thing. What advice might you offer to manufacturers in the industrial sector in terms of selecting and managing the right tools for their enterprise?
Yeah, I think the really focus more lately has been on platforms really that deliver a number of cybersecurity services. Xage Fabric is certainly a platform that delivers all the way from visibility to protection to ability to respond to attacks. There are other tools, there are other solutions on the market as well that are really deliver platforms. Um, and it doesn't mean that you should completely eliminate best of breed type of solutions. I think that some limited budget should be allocated to these types of explorations and best of breed tools. But the majority of focus should really be on a platform that allows you to do things in a converged manner. Otherwise, the security professionals today are really spending way too much time and resources, pulling tools together, trying to understand the data that's being presented, and it's sort of becomes this inverse pyramid of pain, right? For many, right?
Yeah. No, it definitely can be, especially because you work so hard to get the funds to invest in these tools and you want to make the right decision. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So Roman, kind of looking big picture here, you talked a lot about the response in terms to a lot of these hacks and a lot of these attacks and how what we're the right way to go about doing it. Have you seen some of the bigger lessons learned from some of these attacks that maybe we're able to pick up and apply or even share kind of across the industry and in the best way to deal with some of these things?
Yeah, so I think focusing, I mean, it sort of gets back to the basics, I think, and many organizations are missing the basics, not just because of process, but also because they're dealing with, like I said, unique challenges with sort of different types of assets they have across many different areas uh, and vast interaction base. It's really is a complex challenge. It's a very distributed, complex challenge. So the work is cut out for them for sure. But you gotta instead of trying to really focus on, I would say, finding threats, which is an advanced sort of technique for many companies. I think organizations should spend more time on establishing controls for, eliminating things like VPNs, right? Uh, we know those are attack patterns. Should be really no reason for anybody, to continue to stick to the VPNs. Even the federal government today has been compromised through VPNs, right? And has issued directives to eliminate them, and across many of the sectors, right, where they exist. Focus on that. Focus on um, managing credentials, right? Finding ways to manage privileged access, manage credentials, not just on your, Windows machines and servers, but also on your control systems equipment, right? Um, and if they don't support credentials, um, implement, implement um, other measures that compensate for the lack of those credentials, right? And Xage Fabric offers measures for that as well. And then there's this, you know, the other thing I would say is there is this self-induced complexity that's being created today by many organizations because they feel like, well, we have this highly distributed set of assets across many sites, thousands of sites. Uh, why not just throw a firewall everywhere, right? And that's going to be my security, and then I'll take care of the problem. Well, that's not enough, right? And many times it's not necessary. So when you have an access problem, firewall is not a solution, right? Uh, and only creates complexity. So I would say most organizations should really go back and should really first focus on the cyber hygiene and the, let's say, fundamentals of cyber.
No, it makes a ton of sense. That's something we talk a lot about, getting back to the basics for sure. Roman, this has been awesome. A lot of great information put out here. Just kind of wondering, as you look ahead, there's a lot of things that you've mentioned that could impact the future, the immediate future even. We talk about cloud networking. We haven't talked about artificial intelligence yet, but maybe that's something. Are there other big trends that you see really having an impact over the next year and a half?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence for sure, and I think that artificial intelligence can be very helpful and a few things. One is really giving the ability for organizations to understand where they stand from the cybersecurity perspective. What is my cybersecurity posture, right? It gives you this interactive way to um, to work with Gen AI, for example, to be able to ask the right questions and and understand where you stand. The other thing is it's a nice co-pilot in many ways. Gen AI is pretty good at that uh, to actually execute on cybersecurity response, right? So many times when you want to isolate an account, you want to isolate an asset, you want to make changes in some systems, you are able to have this conversation with Gen AI and and it will actually create scripts for you. It understands the APIs of various products. It will be able to execute those tasks for you. And then refine, right? So it helps you refine policies. Um, um, mainly, for example, we see this all the time. Organizations, an employee in our own organization may have access to, 100 assets, but they only use three, right? Should they continue to have access to 100, right? This really expands that attack surface. AI is pretty good at identifying that and suggesting that this shouldn't be happening, right? And it's hard for a human to understand this amount of data and go through all of that, but AI is pretty good at that, and it'll implement the changes to evolve. So, Xage has launched what we call the Xena Copilot recently, and it's quite helpful with these types of tasks. So AI is going to continue to be a nice, it doesn't substitute a human, but it's a nice way to really accelerate your cyber protection.
Excellent. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how AI plays out. The bad guys are getting good at it, but the good guys are getting a lot better, it seems, in terms of how to use it for a lot of different things. Like a lot of things you just mentioned there, also in terms of defining, the algorithms to prevent against some of those attacks or some of the phishing techniques that are being used by social engineers and hackers. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
For sure. Interesting times.
Yeah, without a doubt. Last question I got, and this just kind of comes from the fact that we've been talking a lot about simplifying things, making sure we're doing a lot of the basic things correctly. And one of the things I've begun to wonder a lot about as we get more and more connections throughout OT, how do you feel? I mean, are we over-connected? Do we have too much stuff that is connected, drawing info, sharing information, whatever the case may be? Or is this just something we need to continue to evolve and get better at doing?
So I have pretty good, strong opinions about this. I mean, it just depends on what you look at, right? So
Yeah.
oftentimes, if you look at control systems, they are designed to work in a sort of predefined way. The way you configure it, or the way you program it, that is the way the system it needs to operate, right? It will be designed to operate. It doesn't actually require this any-to-any connectivity, right? So that a network gives you, right? So where everything's connected to everything. But it is used, today's IP network in general, that's the power, right? You can connect anything to anything, right? So over a network. Uh, Control systems don't necessarily need that, but at the same time they use networks, so they get that, right? So the way to really you know to design cyber solution for control system is really adapt the network to operate the way the control system needs it, right? And you can do so through access policies and through interaction controls, just like I described previously with Xage, and that it's sort of that creates that limits the purpose of connectivity of network for the purposes of that control system for production of specific type of a equipment or process or product. It doesn't just create this any-to-any connectivity for no reason.
Mm-hmm. No, makes a lot of sense. So, Roman, last question I got for you here. When you said you were one of the co-founders of the company and you wanted to get into an area that was tough. You picked the industrial sector because of all the connectivity and all the sensors and everything else. You've got your fingers on the pulse of what's going on here. You mentioned a lot of those attacks that have taken place previously. So you know about all the bad stuff. I can only imagine the things that could potentially keep you up at night. But let's flip the script a little bit. What are the things that reassure you right now that are going on in industrial cybersecurity? What are the things that help you feel okay when you put your head down at night?
So I mean, there's quite a bit. It's a good question. There's quite a bit going on there too. I mean, one of the major things is compared to just even 5 years ago, is manufacturing organizations creating teams that are responsible for cybersecurity, right? That means that there's somebody staying up at night, as you say, within the organization that is tasked to, protect that organization from cyber attacks with that focus, right? And that's a big change. Many of them didn't have a single person responsible for cybersecurity. Today, they have teams, they have a CISO. 70%, I think, are actually also converging that with IT now, which is a big percentage. It's a big change as well. Previously, it was completely segmented into operations only, right? And today there's this convergence into IT in a good way convergence, right? It doesn't mean that the OT security is just like IT security, but there's more budget now, right? To do things and from OT security, right? With specific solutions that are OT security centric. And the other thing is the number of products, and the industry has really blossomed from that perspective, right? We have a big realization that IT cybersecurity tools don't don't work in an operational environment because of the reasons I mentioned. It's distributed assets, a variety of protocols, uh, different types of equipment, focus on availability, et cetera, et cetera. So there's specific solutions now built to protect organizations. So that's another great thing that's going on. And the community is quite strong. The professionals, if are really true professionals from that perspective, that have taken OT security very seriously and really moving it forward in a big way. And just I personally love the community that we have.
Thanks, Roman. And for more information on the work him and his colleagues are up to, you can check him out at xage.com. That's XAGE.com. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today as well. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or MBTmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@IEN.com. For Roman Arutyunov, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.